My name is Bob McFarland, and I'm the president of the California Grange Foundation and the California Grange. The Grange is the oldest agricultural organization in the country. We started in 1867, just after the Civil War, during the Reconstruction period. We have 10,000 members in California, serving 185 communities. And we're happy tonight to be hosting this event. But I know you did not come here to listen to me or learn that much about the Grange. So at this time, I'd like to say how honored we are to have a wonderful special guest, a national hero, Mr. Robert Kennedy Jr.
I want to thank Eric Gladen, and I want to thank the Grange for hosting this event. All you extraordinary activists who have spent the last weeks trying to make sure that we're able to protect our children in this state and our country. I'm going to say a couple things. The main attraction here is this extraordinary film, which has finally given us a tool for educating people about the corrosive corruption in the regulatory agency that governs public health, and also about some of the dangers of vaccines. I want to start off saying this, that I am pro-vaccine. I had all 6 of my kids vaccinated. I believe that vaccines are important, that they save millions of lives, and I think that we ought to have policies that encourage and promote full vaccine coverage. But the way to do that is by restoring the integrity and the credibility of the regulatory process and making sure that people have faith that the vaccines that they're getting are safe and that they're efficacious and that they're not going to harm their children. I met with some of the legislators today, and one of the points that I made to them is that the real problem here is that CDC is a very, very troubled agency. And if you look at any study, the reason that people are vaccine hesitant is because of their lack of faith in that agency.
That's right.
And it's not just me who's saying that they're troubled. There's been 4 separate federal studies by Congress, by the United States Senate, by the Inspector General of HHS, and this year by the Office of Research Integrity, the director of that office actually resigned. A world-renowned and respected public health leader, Dr. David Wright, because he said the corruption in the research divisions at FDA and CDC were so intractable that it made the agencies so that they were dysfunctional. And there are two divisions of CDC that are particularly relevant. One is the vaccine, the immunology safety division, and the other is the division that chooses what vaccines that should be added to the schedule. And when I was a little boy, I got 5 vaccines. But today, my children got up to 22. Today, children get 69 vaccines. And the way that they're added to the schedule is the vaccine advisory board, which chooses which vaccines, makes a determination that they're safe, they're efficacious, they're needed, and then posts them onto the schedule. And you would hope that this was a bunch of kind of geeky, independent scientists who are completely focused on public health to help our children. Unfortunately, that's not true. Virtually all of the people on those advisory committees are people who have very serious, grave financial entanglements with this industry. And this is big business. Big pharma is a $1 trillion industry. The vaccine part of that is increasingly one of the biggest profit centers of that industry, because they've got this deal, they've got this extraordinary arrangement with this is an industry that it produces a product, and the government can then instruct 200 million people that they got to buy that project, or they can't send their kids to school. And then they have complete immunity from any kind of defects in that product that might make people sick, because Congress has used its political, or the industry has used its political clout to get rid of lawsuits that compromise the 7th Amendment of the Constitution that says that no American shall be deprived of the right to a jury trial in matter of controversies exceeding $25. That's the 7th Amendment. But if you're vaccine injured, you don't have that constitutional right. The Bill of Rights has been eviscerated because of the power of that industry. So they can put anything they want in that vaccine, and they have no accountability for it. And then, of course, it's a biological product, so the patents never expire. So this is and there's no advertising, there's no marketing that are required. They're just forced, people are forced to buy it. So it's a very, very strong, appealing profit center for the industry. And the way that, the panels that vote those vaccines onto the schedule are, and I'll give you an example. In the year 1999, Dr. Paul Offit, who, as you know, is one of the great prophets of the vaccines, he's a vaccine insider and tycoon, and he's on the Merck payroll, and he sat on one of the panels that voted the rotavirus vaccine onto the schedule. At the time, he was working on a patent for his own rotavirus vaccine, and 6 years later, having opened that gateway, he got his onto the schedule. Then he was able to immediately flip that and sell it for $182 million. So his own vote, we all have to say, are we sure when he can pocket $40 million from that decision, are we sure that when he's making that decision, he made it because he's completely focused on the health of our children? And I think that's a hard sell. So, and what the Inspector General of the HHS said is that 97% of the people who sit on those panels have the same conflicts of interest that Paul Offit had. So that compromised the whole process, and that explains why there are 69 vaccines today. There are 271 vaccines in the CDC pipeline awaiting approval by these committees to be put on the register. Each one of those can mean $1 billion for that industry. And if you go to these panel meetings, it's not a bunch of scientists in white lab coats, making decisions about our children. It's Wall Street analysts in suits who are crowded into that meeting room. And as soon as they make a decision, they all run out in the hallway on their cell phones, and you can watch that stock spike. So this has got these financial entanglements that have removed the process from its essential function, which is public health. And that should worry us. The other division is the Immunology Safety Division, which we've known for many, many years, which is the scientists who determine whether or not that vaccine is safe and whether it's efficacious. And we've known for many, many years that that division is corrupt because it generated all these phony epidemiological studies that are just the worst kind of junk science that I don't have time to go into, but I've been suing people for 30 years. I've brought 500 lawsuits, almost all of them involve scientific controversies, and many of them involve junk science by what we call these phony tobacco scientists or biostitutes who generate this stuff. And epidemiology is notorious. They say in my business, statistics don't lie, but statisticians do. And with epidemiology, you can produce any result that you want, and that's exactly what CDC did. The IOM told them to do biological studies, do toxicological studies, do pharmacological and clinical studies, because molecules don't lie. But epidemiology does, but that's what they chose. And that's the only thing they got in their 9 studies, and they're phony. They're false, they've been disavowed in most cases by their own author. The principal author of their greatest study, the Madison study, which is the Danish study, patently false and fraudulent, is now on the run from Interpol, as you'll see, for having stolen its research, $1 million in research fund from the CDC. So, and then in August of this year, the senior scientist of that division, Dr. Bill Thompson, a 17-year veteran who is currently working at CDC, conscience-stricken, gave a series of taped conversations with Brian Hooker, who's here and will be on the panel afterwards, in which he confessed that his bosses at CDC, and he named the name, Frank Stefano, the branch chief, Robert Chen, the former branch chief, Judy Gerbeny, who was the director of CDC, and then approved the Gardasil vaccine, which made $1 billion for Merck, and then 2 years later went to run back, left CDC to run back Merck's vaccine division. And those three individuals required the scientists who work in the vaccine division for the past 10 years to lie to the public, to massage data, to bury data, to manipulate data in order to bury links between autism and vaccines. And he has turned over tens of thousands of pages of incriminating documents to the United States Congress, and Stuart Burns, who's the chief of staff of the committee of the congressman to whom Thompson handed those papers over, said that those papers are not just a smoking gun, they are a wildfire that will burn CDC to its foundations. And Bill Thompson wants to be subpoenaed because he doesn't want to lose his job, but he also feels great guilt and great shame for the contribution that his division made to the epidemic of neurological disorders that we're now seeing in this country, including ASD and autism. And for any of you who do not believe that there's a connection, who believe that CDC, when they say there's no science out there that connects autism and thimerosal, I wrote a book in which we went out and looked at medical literature and found over 500 peer-reviewed published studies over a 50-year period that show that thimerosal is linked to this inventory of neurological damages, including ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, misery disorder, ASD, autism, and a range of other neurodevelopmental delays. But I asked Brian Hooker to put together a list, an annotated list of the 37 studies that directly link thimerosal to autism, and including the CDC 2013 Groenberg study that shows that when they withdrew thimerosal from vaccines in Denmark in 1993, the ratio of autistics dropped by 33%. So they keep saying in this country, they keep repeating the CDC lie, which is a talking point that they withdrew it from vaccines in this country and the autism rate stayed the same, and that's a lie in 20 different ways. But there is a country they actually did take it out of, and that's Denmark. And we know what happens when they take it out. The autism rates drop. And you're going to see that in this movie. I just want to say, one other thing. I want to say that something about, I got dragged into this involuntarily, kicking and screaming. This is not, I want to go back to my day job. And I've said to CDC, please, show me one study that shows that thimerosal is safe. And if you can do that, just one published study, then I will go on Anderson Cooper and I will publicly apologize for my advocacy, and I will never mention the word thimerosal again, and I will be grateful to you. But they can't do it because you can't design that study. Thimerosal, mercury is 1,000 times more neurotoxic than lead. You could not design a study that made lead look safe. And you can't do it with mercury, it'd be even harder. So they can't do it. And what they've done what they're doing now is there are 1 million kids now in this country. I just came from Utah last night. Utah has the highest compliance rate, vaccine compliance rate in this country, and it's got the highest autism rate. 1 out of every 39 kids has autism. So, and you know, also ASD, 1 out of 39 is autism. And CDC likes to say, well, you hear them saying here, this makes me insane. They say, and they don't actually come out and say it, they kind of hint at it. And they say, well, it's just that we're better at finding it. It's better diagnosis now. So we know what it looks like, so we're identifying it more. It's not actually an epidemic. And what I say to them when they say that is, first of all, you know, I was raised around intellectually disabled children. My family started Special Olympics. My aunt, Eunice Schreiber. I was everywhere, and I was there when it started. I worked at Camp Schreiber every weekend when I was a child. And I was there when they turned it into Special Olympics. And when I was in college, or in high school, I worked for hundreds of hours at the Wasatch Home for the Retarded in upstate New York. And I saw every kind of intellectually disabled kid, and I never saw an autistic kid. And it would have been notable because we were able to include everybody in Special Olympics. But these children, you could never include in Special Olympics. These are kids, and this is what they do. You know, these mothers who were approaching me and telling me, I was going around the country talking about mercury and from coal-burning power plants, and these very compelling, very powerful women were coming up to me and saying, well, the biggest vector for mercury is not coal-burning power plants, it's in our vaccines, and you need to look at the science. And I avoided it, but finally I did it. And I'm used to looking at science. I'm used to reading it, and I'm not scared to read it. And I began reading it, and I began calling people at CDC, Kathleen Stratton, Colleen Boyle, Paul Offit, and saying, what about this study? What about this study? And then I started hearing the lies. And then I heard them go, Paul Offit lied to me, say something to me about ethyl mercury being less toxic than ethyl mercury. And I said, but what about the Burbacker study? Because I read the stuff by then. And he said, oh yeah, well, I may be wrong about that. But then I heard him the next day on NPR, and he said the same thing. And I thought, he's lying, and he knows he's lying. So that's when I got pissed, and I started. I was raised around extraordinary women, powerful women. My grandmother, my mother, my aunt Eunice Schreiber, who started Special Olympics, the biggest civil rights movement of her era, to mainstream these people, intellectually handicapped people, the most vulnerable people in our society who've been locked in warehouses, and bring them out and say, you can't do that anymore. These are American citizens. And I was raised around extraordinary women, but the women that I've met in this movement are the most extraordinary women that I've ever met. They're eloquent, and they've read the science, and they're shrewd, and they're persistent, and they come back again and again, and they don't give up. And this pro-vaccine movement is the most misogynistic movement that I know of. It is a woman-hating movement. You people know what autism. I want people in this room to raise their hands who have a vaccine-injured child. Right? Well, and you know what it's like. And you know, and I've seen it. I've seen these families. There's a 75% divorce rate. These are families that are bankrupted by what happens to what's happened to their child. They're emotionally, physically, and financially destroyed by it. They're completely traumatized by what's happened, and they somehow pick themselves up. And then they're doubly traumatized because they go to their pediatrician and they know what happened to their child. They saw it happen. They took that child to the doctor, the pediatrician, when he's 2 years old. He sees all the milestones in speech, in language, in coordination, sports, in social interactions, able to meet your eyes and point, and then they get the shot that night. They have a fever 103, then they go into seizures, 3 months later their brain is gone. And, you know, CDC says, well, we just weren't noticing it before. But if we were noticing it before, and we're now down to 1 in 68 kids, where are all the 30-year-old autists? Where are all the 40-year-old autists? We didn't even know. So I was raised in this area. I didn't know what autism was until I saw Rain Man. So, and where are other pockets of these adults who are in diapers and football helmets and are nonverbal, and millions of them, millions there'd have to be, and there's none of them. And yet they try to say they are Holocaust deniers, because this is a Holocaust. What this is doing to our country. 1 million on severely autistic, 3.8 million ASD, and tens of millions around the world where we're selling it and poisoning people all over Africa and Asia and these countries all over the world. And it is a Holocaust. And CDC has a policy where they will not call this an epidemic. They will not say the autism crisis. They have a standard phrase. They say a serious health concern. That's what it is. And they have these traumatized mothers who are already traumatized, and they are double traumatizing by calling them hysterics and refrigerator moms and people who are seeking some kind of answer to their problems. Yeah, they are, and they know the answer because they've been on PubMed and they read the science and they know what it says. And they are, and thank God that you are out there doing this, not for just yourself, but for all the American people. Because for most of you, I know you can't do it. You cannot afford to be here tonight. For that kind of child, you can't even get a babysitter who can come home and sit on the kid's chest, and when he goes into seizures, or when he starts attacking or headbanging his parents, or all of these things that you know about. And they are okay with you becoming politically invisible. That's what they're counting on. That is going to suck so much energy out of you taking care of that kid, and the bankruptcies and the divorces and the inability to leave your home. That it's going to take so much energy that you're going to let them lie and lie and lie, and nobody's going to call them on their lies. But now they've piled their fraud upon fraud upon fraud so high that the artifice is toppling and wobbling. And all we need to do now is keep pushing, and it's going to topple. And we're going to put that in this Holocaust. So I encourage you to watch the movie and stay involved and make sure that we make sure that we're going to protect all people in this country from what they're now. They parlayed this is 170 measles cases, no deaths. At the same 4-month period, we had 9,000 autism diagnoses in this country. They parlayed that into a national, effort, 101 of these statutes in 36 states, and we're going state by state informing people about what's really happening and what CDC is really doing and what the vaccine industry is really doing. And all the checks and balances that we have in this country are gone. The things between, I'll finish with this. Normally you would have a federal government and politicians who would protect it. But they're gone because the vaccine industry is the biggest contributor to lobbying in our country and to political contributions. They have $2.6 billion. They give twice what oil and gas is. A reporter asked me earlier today, well, it's like the military-industrial complex. Well, no, it's worse. They give 4 times what defense and aeronautics give. So they control our political structure. Then they control the other check and balance. The regulatory agency that's supposed to protect us from the industry has become a sock puppet for the industry that's supposed to regulate. And then the next barrier in our system should be the lawyers. Who would do depositions and look for documents, incriminating documents, and sue them and keep them honest. But they've been able to get rid of the lawyers and get rid of the courts. So you go to Vaccine Corp, it's a secret court, only 10% of the people are injured actually even ever get there. And they pay the lawyers a pittance, and the rewards are tiny. and it takes years to get them, and there's no jury trial, and there's no discovery. So, and you're not suing if the guy who poisoned you, you're suing the U.S. government, and you've got them against you. So they've gotten rid of the lawyers, they've gotten rid of the courts, they've gotten rid of the regulatory agencies, they've gotten rid of the politicians. There's one thing left, and that's the press. And they completely compromised the press. They give up to the industry, $5.4 billion in advertising to television, radio, and the newspapers. And that's why you will not hear me on any of those venues. Not even the big ones. Not even the mainstream press, ABC, NBC, CBS. Forget about them. You won't hear me in Mother Jones, with the so-called alternative press. Huffington Post, Salon, Slate, all of them are under pressure from this industry, and they will not print anything about the truth of what's going on in this country. And I was talking to the head of one of the networks the other day, and he said, yeah, he said, we get 70% of our news department revenue in non-election years from the pharmaceutical industry. You go look at a network news program tomorrow or tonight, and you will say it's just a vehicle for selling pharmaceutical products. And he said to me, if one of my hosts had somebody on that made me lose one of those sponsors, I would fire him. And they all feel that way. So there's so much, there's this Kafka-esque censorship now in this country with the press. I sent editorial to Sacramento Bee. They won't publish it. They won't publish letters to the editor when they write completely false things. The newspapers won't report them. They will not correct them even when they're demonstrably false. We have been completely shut out from this debate. And it is this Kafka-esque censorship that's going on. So all of the things that are supposed to stand between a rapacious industry and our little children have been dismantled. All those checks and balances, the press, the politicians, the regulatory agency, the courts, they're all gone. And the only thing left is the parent. And now they're trying to get rid of that. And we know that.
On the left, of course, is filmmaker Eric Gladen. Let's give him a round of applause. I keep trying to tell people, if you would just see this movie, you'll see that it's a game changer. Am I right? Yes. Next to Eric, we have Dr. Brian Hooker, who you will recognize from the movie. With Dr. Hooker's amazing ingenuity to get some of that conversation, or some of the conversations that he had with CDC researcher Dr. William Thompson on tape, so that we have evidence like that. Thank you, Dr. Hooker. The next man needs no introduction. We have Mr. Kennedy still with us, and we thank him for staying through the movie for the Q&A. And in just a couple minutes, Dr. Bob Sears, one of California's most beloved pediatricians, will be joining these panelists. But we're going to get going now. And I'm thrilled to say that I do believe we have some legislators, some California legislators, right here in our audience tonight, and or some of their staffers. And I would like That was our hope, the people that have been working hard to put this screening on. It was our hope that we could encourage those who represent us to come see this movie, especially before this egregious bill, SB 277, goes any further. So we're just thankful for any legislators who have come tonight. And we'd like to invite you up first to the microphone to ask any questions you might have. So if we have any legislators or legislative staffers who would like to come up to ask some questions of our panelists, I invite you to come first. And after that, I'll invite anyone, excuse me, anyone else who's interested. Any takers, any senators, assembly members? I did just have a request. If there are any senators and assembly members still here, we would love to recognize you. We would love to ask you to stand up and just thank you. And also, if you're a staff member who's come on behalf of a senator or assembly member, we would really appreciate if you could stand up so we could recognize you. Okay, so if you are interested in asking a question, please come get in line right here, and you'll have an opportunity. One question per person.
It was said earlier that there was a distinct financial relationship between a variety of lobbyists and the folks who do the regulation. Do these kinds of relationships also exist between other lobbyists and other regulators and non-pharmaceutical industries, or is this very unique?
I would say it's the opposite of unique. In fact, there's a name for it. It's called agency capture phenomena, and it's the dynamic through a number of forces by which agencies become captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. And it happens through a number of pressure points, through budgeting from the legislative agencies, through relationships that develop between the industry, through a revolving door between the industry and the regulatory agency. A lot of times, it's the practice of industry to hire people after they have retired from the regulatory agency. And in that way, that's one of the primary mechanisms that they use to capture the agency, so that the older people in the agency whose pensions are about to mature begin looking around. They may still be quite young. Maybe they went to work for 20 years. The government pension will mature by the time they're 40 years old. They still got another 15 working years, and now they can demand a much higher salary from an industry. So as they approach retirement age, they're now at the head of their little divisions, and they can start doing favors. They want to start doing favors for the industry where they're looking for a job. So, and it changed the culture of these regulatory agencies very quickly. And the classic example is Julie Gerberding, who was the director of CDC, and she marshaled through personally the approval of the Gardasil vaccine, very controversial vaccine, killing a lot of people. And Gardasil was Merck's vaccine, and the approval of that was worth $1 billion to Merck. And 2 years after she marshaled through its approval, she took the job, left CDC, and took the job as president of the vaccine division at Merck. So, and it's that kind of subtle corruption that basically transforms agencies. That results in what we call agency capture. But we see it everywhere. We see it, if you go to West Virginia, the coal industry is just a subsidiary. I mean, the DEP in West Virginia is just a subsidiary of the coal industry. You see it in the financial sector. You see it in all the environmental regulatory agencies in every state that I've been involved with over the last 30 years.
In addition, I had many conversations with Dr. William Thompson. Dr. William Thompson actually evolved into the CDC after a stint at Merck, and several other vaccine safety officers, namely Frank DeStefano and Tom Verstraeten, who you saw from the video, ended up in industry, in lucrative industry jobs after a stint at the CDC.
First, I would like to thank you very much for being here and showing this film. And I would like to ask if there would be someday in the future that we could try these executives for crimes against humanity, or somehow put them behind bars for what they're doing.
You know, that's a very good question. When you look at the level of malfeasance at the CDC, the level of fraud that has been perpetrated, and you know, especially as revealed by the whistleblower William Thompson, you see that there were a tremendous number of children that were put in harm's way, and put in harm's way knowingly in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and you know, there's got to be some level of legal recourse. I wish you know, I'm not an attorney. I'm a scientist, but you know, I know that there are legal avenues, and there are attorneys that are actually looking into that very thing.
Hi, my name is Silvana Appleman. I'm from Agoura Hills in California. First of all, I want to thank you, all of you, for speaking the truth. It's just so unbelievably important and brave and courageous. And your knowledge and expertise on this level is just, we need it. I'm not as knowledgeable. I've only been doing this for 2 or 3 months since January, since the measles outbreak. It's a sinister business, and everybody in this room is here because we've educated ourselves about the other side of it, but we're not hearing because of the $5 billion that the media and this whole thing, it's just so much conflict of interest that's unbelievable. So we feel like, you know, the support's incredible. I have 2 things. I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren, and I will not have them. I just have been fighting and educating myself and explaining to them everything about this and the caution and the danger in it. I had a child in 75 who died of SIDS at 3 months. And we're hearing now that there's something to do with, or I'm understanding that there's something to do with that, because it's always a mystery, and I accepted it as a mystery. That's one thing. My grandson, Brighton, at 4 years old, developed tics. And my daughter went on a hero's journey of healing him through glutathione and supplements and all of that, and now he's fine. So to me, I haven't slept. This is all I've been doing. I've asked my husband. It's been an obsession. And it's not going to happen. If SB 277, if they think that they can do this, it's not going to happen. They're going to have a revolt. We're not going to put the kids in school, and it's going to be a mess. So everybody in this room, everybody, and spread this, because what's happening in this country is our rights being taken away across the board with the corporations, across the board. So we the people need to be the people power, and just as far as the SIDS goes, anything about that you know about.
You know, one of the indications is, especially regarding thimerosal exposure, you know, one of the risks of thimerosal exposure is death. And so, you know, if you read the MSDS for thimerosal, it does list death as a side effect, and it's not something that is, you know, develops instantaneously, but the level of thimerosal that it actually crosses the brain-blood barrier accumulates over time, and so, you know, there is that particular indication. You know, regarding SIDS specifically, There are other vaccines that have been tied to SIDS, not just the thimerosal-containing vaccines. So, but I do know that, one of the things that even CDC scientists were very quietly concerned about was the amount of thimerosal that was given in infant vaccines, especially when they not only were giving the seasonal flu shot, but also the H1N1 flu shot, and both of those contain thimerosal.
Great, thank you.
So when we were doing when we were assembling the hundreds of studies for the book, we included studies that were that we considered kind of worthy of, that had the power to be really relevant and kind of airtight. And we found really strong evidence of ADD, of connections between thimerosal exposure and ADD, speech delay, language delay, tics, hyperactivity disorder, misery disorder, neurodevelopmental delays, ASD, and autism. We saw other studies that were weaker, but that also indicated a connection or a link to SIDS and also to other illnesses, including asthma and allergies and a number of other illnesses that also began in 1989. So all of these illnesses started at the same time in 1989 when the CDC changed the vaccine schedule. I hadn't seen, when I was a little boy, I never knew anybody with allergies, peanut allergies, or, asthma. My brother had asthma, and he was told by a doctor there would never be a cure because it was such a rare disease that nobody would invest in studying it. Wow. And now it's like 1 in 4 kids in the inner cities has it. So something changed, and it has the same timeline as these neurological illnesses, which is that what EPA calls the gateway year, which is 1989. But the studies have not been done, and as Brian will tell you, the reasons the study, and Eric's film shows in May of 2004, they produced all these phony. After the Verstraeten study, they produced all these phony epidemiological studies, which are worthless, so that they could say, the problem has been solved, we know there's no link, no study should ever be done. And they began blackballing scientists and defunding scientists who were trying to do those kind of studies. But the main thing, the worst thing that they've done, is they've taken the vaccine safety data link, which are the vaccine records that CDC was keeping for 9 million children from three HMOs. And they keep all their medical records. So and that's where they got the data for the Verstraeten study. They got it by studying the vaccine safety data link. But this is a huge treasure trove of information. And if CDC wanted to know whether vaccines were causing autism, or SIDS, or asthma, or diabetes, or ADD, or ADHD, they could find it out in a week simply by studying the vaccine safety database. But as soon as they realized that the Verstraeten study, their first study of it, showed an 1,100% increase between people who had a little thimerosal compared to people who had more thimerosal, so a direct dose-related response. And they never studied non-vaccinated populations versus vaccinated populations, which is what they really need to do to answer these questions. But that vaccine safety data link contains all the information that you would need to do a thorough and complete real epidemiological studies on all these issues. And they could determine the link between vaccines and every one of these issues, and between thimerosal and every one of these issues overnight, simply by opening the vaccine safety data link. So what did they do? Because they had it. They had all that information. They immediately gave it to a private company called AHIP, the American Health Insurance Plan. And their theory was, if they could give it to a private company to manage, that it wouldn't be susceptible to freedom of information requests, and nobody could get in there. So we pay $20 million a year for this insurance company to store this data, and all they're doing is making sure that it's in a locked box that nobody is allowed to see it. And they won't let independent scientists look at it. They occasionally look at it themselves, right? But they do it in a very controlled way. You know, after telling everybody else don't study this, they study it in a very controlled way and periodically release, you know, more of these ridiculous epidemiological studies. But they won't let independent scientists, since the year 2000, they have never let a single independent scientist in to look at it. And in the entire history of the database, there's only 2 scientists who've ever been allowed to look at it, and those are the Geyers. And they got allowed to look at it because Congress ordered CDC to allow them to look at it. And they didn't have to just order them once, they had to repeatedly order them because CDC was defying the order. They did not want to let the Geyers in there. When they finally did, they didn't let the Geyers leave with any data. They had to copy down stuff while they were in there, but they produced them. How many studies? Over 50 studies, and those studies are very, very important studies that directly link autism to dose-related thimerosal exposures. But anyway, we could have those answers overnight if they ever let us do the research on that big treasure trove of information, and they won't do it. You know, and it's insane that there's press in this country who is letting them get away with that, who's letting them hide that public information that we are paying for from the American people, and none of the press will complain.
I'm going to let it go.
You should welcome Bob Sears, though.
So you might have noticed that we had a 4th panelist slip in, the California beloved pediatrician, Dr. Bob Sears. Flown up from Southern California to be here tonight and also to be here tomorrow. So we're really thankful and appreciative for that. Let's give you one more round of applause.
So we could have been in your movie. I have a 2.5-year-old baby girl who just 2 months ago had the MMR shot, and like a light switch after 6 days of fever, she just went into all sorts of autistic behavior. After a lot of treatments and things, she's doing a lot better. But we thought it was a thimerosal-free shot, and we've been told that it was the combination of 3 live viruses that overwhelmed her immune system, and swelling in the brain, that kind of thing. Have you studied that? I mean, how can we have guarantee that vaccines without thimerosal will be safe?
The MMR vaccine has only been studied once by the CDC. There's only been one study, and they claim that that's the definitive study that shows that there is no relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism incidence, except for when you look at the background data that Dr. Thompson provided to me. If you look at what's called isolated autism, that's an autism diagnosis without any other type of diagnosis. The relative risk, the risk of those that, looking at infants that got the MMR on time versus the MMR delayed, the incidence of isolated autism goes up by somewhere between 7 and 10-fold.
Yeah, and one of the studies that Dr. Thompson says that he was forced to lie about was that a 2004 study with Frank DiStefano, who was the head of the branch chief and one of the people who's orchestrated all of the manipulation. And what Ryan discovered originally, and that Dr. Thompson later admitted, was that the data clearly showed that there was an increase in autism among African American boys who were given the MMR vaccine prior to 36 months of age. So, the study that they do, that study, the data that they have, admittedly, the MMR vaccine is doing something. And we, if you talk to the science people, and Brian can talk to more articulately about this than I can, but we believe that the best evidence is that there are a number of insults that occur and that make a child's brain more vulnerable, and that a series of thimerosal vaccines and then followed by the MMR vaccine. There's too many anecdotal stories out there that are identical to your story. I've heard thousands of them. It's so arrogant for these government officials to say, to dismiss all these stories. It's just say, that's just a coincidence. Ultimately, anecdotal evidence becomes science, if there's enough of it. And your story I have heard literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times about the MMR vaccine. So it doesn't contain thimerosal, but there's strong evidence that it's doing something really bad to our children, and they should spread it out. Here.
Yeah, just a real quick comment. I do hear that same story a lot, and then I also see a number of children who handle the MMR vaccine very well when we give it. But kind of as a general precaution, I stopped giving MMR vaccine to infants in my office about 7 years ago. Now, when I do give it, I give it to older children who are 4 or 5 for the parents who want it, to consider, the disease status and the risks versus benefits. So I do have a number of kids that do want the vaccine at 4 or 5, but I did, as a precaution, stop giving it unless parents want it. And I have had some infants go ahead and get the vaccine since then, and again, the majority of them do really well. But I think if you're torn right now, trying to figure out what to do with your infants, you do have the option to delay the vaccine, and if you have a bad reaction like this, I would recommend that the gentleman, I think you mentioned this was 2 months ago, make sure you have this medically documented by your doctor. Make sure you get it written down, and you get copies of that now, so you have that with you, because you'll need that to get a medical exemption later. But I would encourage anyone who has a bad vaccine reaction, you can't just call the doctor's office and tell them it happened. They're never going to write it down. They won't write it down. No one writes down phone calls. You have to go into your doctor's office, sit there, show the doctor your child, have them write down the symptoms, watch what they write down, so that it gets properly documented. So years later you have that if you need it to help protect your child from that vaccine again, or to make a case in court, or to report the reaction to the VAERS database. So I'm glad you have it documented. That's kind of something that everyone should know. You can never just call the doctor and expect that they're writing down everything you say on the chart, because you go back a year later to look for this documentation and it won't be there.
Hi. I go to a Catholic high school. I'm a freshman right now. And just recently in my accelerated biology class, we had a section on vaccines. And I've been raised with extensive knowledge about autism and vaccines because my brother is 20 now and has been living with autism. So when I asked my biology teacher if there was any sort of presence of mercury at all, because I said I'd been seeing it on the news and things like that, and I wanted to know what was going on, she said that there was absolutely no thimerosal, no mercury whatsoever in preservatives or in the vaccine itself. And everybody else in the class just seemed to kind of roll with it. So I was wondering, how best should we go about educating high school students and middle school students on thimerosal and mercury in these vaccines?
Yeah. I, the simplest way would be to go to fda.gov and go to their vaccine page, and you kind of have to navigate a little bit, but you find the vaccine product inserts, and you pull up all the flu vaccine product inserts, and just print them all up, and you'll see the majority of them will list how many micrograms of thimerosal are in there. It'll be right there on the FDA website. You can also Google search flu vaccine product inserts. But I suggest you get the ones dated this year, these are the most up-to-date ones, and you just show that. That's by far the easiest way. They're not going to just believe you if you tell them. And I don't know of any other straightforward way to do that other than literally hand them the printed up product insert, or go by a pediatrician's office and ask if you can have some of their flu vaccine product inserts out of the refrigerator. Just tell them you're doing a research study, and then they would probably be happy to hand you some of those.
So the information is just available?
Yeah, it's right there on the FDA's website. Yeah. And I love it. My 13-year-old was in his biology class, and after his teacher gave her rant about how important vaccines were, everything she said was true. They didn't really get into mercury, but she just said, I feel like they're very important. And my 13-year-old son raised his hand and said, well, don't you worry about, the rare but very severe side effects? Isn't that something that can happen? And then she just kind of didn't even answer him. She just kind of moved on, and I was kind of very proud of him for standing up like that at 13. So I am proud of you for being involved in this. And yeah, bringing those products in.
Doing this project, my question is, did you look at aluminum and how that affects us, because that's in nearly every childhood vaccine today?
Yeah, mercury took me long enough.
I know. I'll be your next project.
There was so much to the mercury side of this that I didn't really have much time to look at the rest. There's a lot of concerns with aluminum, a lot of concerns with MMR. There's a lot of concerns with other adjuvants, other additives. And to be honest, I was so specific to mercury because I was personally affected by the mercury. And once I went down that route, the research and the science just engulfed me. Kind of like with Bobby, his book is about thimerosal. This film is about thimerosal because I think there's just so much to it. To add any other elements in would have kind of confused people even more because it's such a complicated subject. But we did look at the synergistic effect. There's a very synergistic effect between mercury and aluminum. And we did look at that aspect because you even look at the Simpsonwood transcripts. I think it's a veterinarian out of Oregon State University, I believe, where I went to school, brought up the fact of the synergistic effect between aluminum and thimerosal that they're not even considering. And that may have been one of the first times that they started questioning, oh wait, there might be a synergistic effect with some of these things. You look at the material safety data sheet for thimerosal, it specifically says never combine with aluminum. That's why you can't bring mercury on an airplane, because it'll burn a hole right through it. Yeah, through the fuselage. So I did look at the synergy because Boyd Haley did some studies between thimerosal, as you saw in the film, the synergy between aluminum and thimerosal. So I kind of stuck to that route. I know there has been a lot of research since. There's been a documentary since called Age of Aluminum that does focus on some of the harm. It's a heavy metal too, and we're giving it very high levels compared to the guideline, and it's bound to be doing harm. I didn't take that route to look at it yet, and maybe I don't think that's the next film. And same with MMR. I didn't have much of a chance to look at MMR, and there's implications all over the place that there is an effect there, and maybe it's playing some kind of role in the autism epidemic as well. I just couldn't get to it. I don't know if anybody else can speak to it.
One of the things about aluminum is it's an adjuvant, and it is there when a vaccine itself does not elicit a sufficient immune response in order to get what are called memory B cells to actually be stimulated and create, immune memory. Aluminum is put in as an adjuvant in order to prolong and sustain the immune response. The problem with that is not everybody is going to react the same to aluminum, and the immune response can be even more prolonged, upwards of 4, 5, 6 weeks. The immune system was not designed to be on that long of a period of time or on hyper alert for that period of time. And that's when you start to get more autoimmune disorders. And the thing that concerns me so much as a scientist is the persecution of scientists that are now looking at other vaccine additives like aluminum, and those that would dare look at the MMR, looking at what happened to Dr. Andrew Wakefield. And, you know, these researchers are almost out of the gate or blackballed. But they're, you know, I encourage you to continue to do research. There's some great work coming out of the University of British Columbia and Israel, as you said. But we need to encourage these scientists to continue and keep them out of harm's way.
Hi, thank you so much for everything that you've done and all the education that you're giving to us. I just feel a little overwhelmed as a mom because I'm not very scientifically minded. You know, I tend to go with my instincts more. But I have a daughter who's almost 2 who's not vaccinated and expecting another one. So I guess my question is, if this law does pass, SB 277, and if there's no more personal belief exemption, I just want to be able to protect my kids from an adverse reaction before it happens. I don't want to wait for that to happen and have to go back. So I'm just wondering, I don't know, any advice?
You know, if this bill passes, I'm confident they're probably going to amend it to allow people to homeschool. According to what was put on the legislative website last night, the writer of something on the website claimed that the authors of the bill have asked for an amendment that allows people in a private homeschool program to not be subject to the bill. I mean, that's not part of the bill officially, but according to this writer, the authors requested that be amended into the bill. I don't know if anyone knows differently, but I imagine just in practical terms, you will be allowed to homeschool and you know, make whatever choice regarding vaccines you want. That might create a financial hardship on your family, and I know that's not ideal, and I don't like it. But I would say literally no one's actually going to be physically forced to vaccinate. You might be financially forced to vaccinate if you can't homeschool your kids. But I would say any family that does feel that it would be important to go ahead and vaccinate, but it's kind of against what you would rather do, you would certainly be able to delay vaccines. And when you go ahead, if you do vaccines when your child is older, you need far fewer doses. You might get by with approximately 12 doses of vaccines on an older child compared to the approximately 35-ish doses that a 5-year-old might have had by the time they're 5. So it would be a much smaller thing, the amount of vaccines you'd be able you need to have to meet the requirements should you want to put your 2-year-old into kindergarten when he or she turns 5. So you would be able to work that out probably with the physician. I'll be writing about those options in the years to come. But I would say right now, as it is right now, you're not going to be forced into this. So I think that's kind of how I would speak to that. But again, I think that the lawmakers are a little clever. I'm afraid they're sort of going to act as if they're doing us all a favor by allowing you to homeschool and not vaccinate, so that maybe we'll all be quiet and not fight the bill. I would rather not accept that them conceding to that. I'd rather just fight the whole thing.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, as an educator with 30 years experience and also a homeschool parent, this is something that really concerns me, that this amendment's been thrown in, and I think it was a genius move, and I actually said to my group of parents that this was going to happen. I could see it coming because now we have freedom, right? Freedom to not get our education in school, But that's a sort of element of freedom that allows them to try and get this bill through. I think that we need to be saying very clearly, we cannot allow this bill to go through. And we need to work beyond it. And that was actually my question that I was coming here to ask. We cannot allow this bill to go through. It is such a removal of parental rights, and it is such a dangerous bill to be attempting to pass. I'm concerned that if we say, okay, well, the thimerosol's going, the mercury's going, and we don't address what else is in these vaccines. And I, quite personally, I don't even trust the CDC if they tell me something's gone. I don't trust them. Why would I trust these people? So I have zero trust that anything they tell me has gone from a vaccine or is safe. So this bill needs to be killed. So what I'm doing right now is looking forward. After this bill has died, are we all going to go home and go, okay, we got away with it, and 5 years, 2 years, whatever, down the road, there'll be another outbreak of something that we're all told is deadly, and we'll be right back here, but we'll have lost our power because so many people would have got, jaded with it. Are you seeing, Mr. Kennedy, are you seeing any evidence that our policymakers that you're speaking to, not just here, but in Oregon, Washington, and the other states, are actually going to take this on and hold somebody to account for this and make things change? Because if we could see that, if we could see a leader saying we move on from this, I think all these parents, all these professionals would be behind them right across the country. But we need to do it now. We can't wait. Are we seeing evidence that that is going to happen?
I think Eric and I have been kind of touring the country too. They parlayed this 120 or 170 measles cases into this national campaign that was orchestrated very carefully by all these front groups like the American Association of Pediatrics and everybody but by two. Everybody Child by Two, which is Paul Offit's. These are what we call AstroTurf or front groups for the industry. They're phony grassroots groups that are actually financed by industry to push these and ALEC in the local legislatures, and then their control of the press, which has drummed up this fear. It was like the Iraq War, right? Yeah. It's just oh look, the measles are coming to get us. It's more contagious than Ebola, for God's sake. And the fact that it's not it's not killing anybody is not relevant. And meanwhile, in that same 4-month period, there were 9,000 autism cases diagnosed, which CDC has a policy that we do not use the word epidemic for that. We'll use it for 120 measles cases, but not for 1 million autism cases. So, but we went to, we showed them, when we went up to Oregon, they said, the legislature there said, this bill is on the rails, it's a freight train, it cannot be stopped. Within 2 days of us going up there and showing the film, and we had like 16 legislators show up for the film, and we went and talked to a lot of them, a lot more. And by the next day, it was dead. Yeah. And we did the same thing in Illinois, and I'm fairly confident we killed the bill there. It also then died in Washington and North Carolina, where we were about to go, and so I think it is, the act is not necessarily coming from us as much as it's coming from us and the activists, because when we went into one of the senator's office, he showed us 2 piles of mail that he had gotten, one from people who were for the bill, which was about 4 pages, and a couple of Manhattan telephone directories from people who were against it. And then, this film embarrasses them because they realize they've been tricked. They realize that they've been sold a bill of goods and that they are dancing to the strings of the puppeteer. And, I think particularly both Republicans and Democrats were just embarrassed when they saw this. They realized that they had been played by CDC and by the fear lobby and by the vaccine industry, and they were, they kind of were looking for ways to backpedal, but to not lose face. And I think even here, when we talk to these these legislators, even some of the bill sponsors, are trying to figure out ways to get out of it and to do it sort of gracefully when they understand what's really going on. So, you know, the way that they got here is by driving this momentum, and just like how we got into the Iraq War. You know, they drove the fear and they confused everybody and thinking, you know, 70% of the people who watched Fox News thought that Saddam Hussein had bombed the World Trade Center. And that's the same thing they did here. They made everybody think that somebody unvaccinated, which we don't know, you know, went to Disneyland and then infected all these people who had already had vaccines, and it's like... How does that work? Vaccines were supposed to protect you.
Yeah,
totally. It was really, you know, none of the... If you really listen to the newscasts, it was just, none of them made any sense. They were senseless. But everybody gets caught, you know, in that fear-based, you know, that 24-hour news cycle, so they go ahead and do it. But to me, if we can get them and we can stall it long enough, we can kill it. Yeah. And that's. I'm glad that we go through the 3 committees, because I think we get another shot at it. And one thing I would say is that, you know, after World War II, after, you know, it came out about Mengele and all of these, you know, horrible experiments at, and both in Germany and in the occupied territories and in the concentration camps. We signed the Nuremberg Accords, the Helsinki Accords, which are all the civilized nations signed, that said that you can't, any medical procedure requires informed consent. Mm-hmm. And this is vaccination is a medical procedure, and it is a medical procedure that is risky. The United States Supreme Court said it is unavoidably unsafe. So how can you subject people, children, to medical procedures involuntarily using the police power of the state that the highest court of the state has said is unavoidably unsafe, and force them to go through that medical procedure? It is against all of our values, and it's against the treaties that we signed. So, you know, and what I've said again and again is the reason people are vaccine hesitant is because they don't trust the regulatory agency. If you want everybody to vaccinate, restore the integrity of the agency and the process. Don't try to use the police power of the state to advance the mercantile interests of these corporations who have corrupted the agency that's supposed to protect us.
I just want to let our panelists know it's shortly before 9, just before 9. Are you willing to take more questions? Are we still good? Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Kennedy, I'll be brief. I think you read my mind. I was going to ask for you to comment on the freedom aspects of this. But the big issue that I don't hear being talked about a lot is it really right for us to take away people's freedom to refuse medical procedures? The ultimate check and balance on corruption is the right of the citizens to refuse to do something. So anyway, thank you for that. I think you all actually already addressed what I wanted to hear. I had a reaction to a vaccine when I was a baby 33 years ago. I only got 1 dose of the pertussis. My family didn't know about thimerosal at the time. Maybe that's what it was. We thought it was just something was wrong with that one vaccine for me. But fortunately, I didn't get any more. Some other kids my age got several doses, and they had some problems, some lasting problems. It's real important that we affirm freedom. I think only parents are in the best position to know why they need to opt out. So, and then I also understand you are meeting with State Senator Lois Holt from Davis, who declined to be here tonight. I wonder what it was she didn't want to hear coming here, but I understand you're meeting with her and some of the other local legislators tomorrow. And thank you so much for doing that. And I also want to thank you for recognizing that anecdotal evidence is where science comes from.
That's right.
I guess I don't really have a question here, but if you want to say anything more about that, thank you so much. And thank you, Eric, for making this film.
Hello. I kind of fell into this. I haven't had a child who's been harmed by a vaccine or anything, but my children haven't received vaccines, not because I was aware of the risk completely, but because of my experiences with birth control and having an adverse effect. I started looking at the FDA and the CDC and some of that stuff and saying, some of this doesn't make sense, and things aren't adding up, so I just became a little skeptical, and I had my first son in 2001, and for fear, I didn't vaccinate. I've had a lot of criticism for not vaccinating, and even currently, because they're like, what is your 11-year-old going to get autism? And I'm just mocked, but my concern is how, as a parent, my education is not in science. I can read and I can understand, and I'm not dumb, but I don't have a science background. And I see inconsistencies, I see things that I'm concerned about, but every time my husband and I have a conversation, are we going to vaccinate? Are we going to vaccinate? We try and say, okay, well, for example, chickenpox. How deadly is it really? How long has this vaccine been around? Are the ingredients that's in this the same that was in it when they did it, I guess, in China first? And so every time we come to the table and we're trying to play scientists and we're trying to play doctors, and we're not, and we have our doctors telling us, you're not educated enough to make this decision, and I'm saying, well, it's my child, so I get to make the decision. I'm educated enough to know that. But how do I navigate these waters as a parent? It's scary. And do I get this vaccine and possibly let my child be injured, or do I let them possibly be exposed to this disease? It's difficult as a parent. Where could I turn?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the office. I've had that question many times a day. You would read 3 or 4 books of all different types. But it ultimately comes down to just your intuition. As a parent, since you don't have a medical background, you would basically read a lot of different medical opinions, and then just listen to your gut. What is your instinct telling you? I ask parents, what do you fear more, the diseases based on what you've read, or the chance of having a severe vaccine reaction? What grabs you more as a parent? What do you feel worse about? The small risk of having a bad vaccine reaction, or the small risk of having a severe case of the disease. And I also ask parents to pretend like you made a decision, and you don't vaccinate, and how does that feel? You're just sitting there. Does that feel good to you? How do you feel about it, just as a parent? Try to make in your mind, pretend that you gave your child 2 vaccines. Say, just pretend like you did that today. How do you think you would feel? Let's say your child does fine with them, and do you feel good about that? Do you feel extremely nervous about that? Sometimes it just comes down to your gut feeling and intuition as a parent, because that's an important tool that I think every parent is equipped with as you use science and medical information to help guide that intuition. I don't know what more can be said about that.
One of the things that my wife and I have a vaccine-injured child, and we do homeschool, and regardless of whether you've got a child that's been vaccine-injured or not, the parents are the ones that are spending all the time with that child, seeing that child day in, day out, day and night, knowing the idiosyncrasies of that child and how that child has reacted to other medications. So I encourage you, as Dr. Sears has said, to trust your gut and to trust your intuition. If you don't feel comfortable about something that the government is telling you that is good to put in your body or in your wonderful child's body, then I would certainly listen to that voice.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Hi. I just want to thank you and Mr. Kennedy for everything you guys have done to raise awareness about this issue. I have a 13-year-old son who, for the past 11 years, I've been recovering from vaccine-induced autism, and I've been involved for almost as many years in autism advocacy and fundraising. And when I think about where we are now compared to where we were then, it's like light years, and it's because of people like you, because you've been game-changing. So thank you. So I have a big stake in this game, and I'm really interested in the House of Cards and what is going on with William Thompson, and what do you know? What are the next steps? Where are we with that?
That's a good question. Dr. Thompson is still at the CDC. I do not maintain direct contact with him just for the obvious reasons, but I'm in contact with his attorney. They've got him in a little room with a little light and a little computer where he can't do any more harm to the CDC, evidently. But he is actually begging to be subpoenaed by Congress, and he is not allowed to. The CDC will not allow him to voluntarily testify if he's called to voluntarily testify. So he is working with several congressional representatives, started out with the Science Committee. The Science Committee, what's called in House Science, Space, and Technology, has decided not to pursue the issue, but Oversight and Government Reform, the new chair of Oversight and Government Reform is Representative Jason Chaffetz from Utah, which has the highest autism incidence in the United States, by the way. Is now looking at that particular issue. So if, we are the real grassroots, we're not AstroTurf here, but the place to apply pressure and to get William Thompson subpoenaed is going directly to Jason Chaffetz's office and say, hey, you've got a CDC whistleblower, we want to know what he has to say, we want this to come to the light of day, children's lives are being put at risk, and so please subpoena William Thompson.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Carter. I'm an activist and a member of the community Grange, and I want to thank the Grange members for continuing to make me come to this. And right now, I'm really at odds because with me it's different. I'm a what you would call a guinea pig in the room. 6 months ago, I took the shot I got a call from Benchmark Research to come and take the influenza flu shot for a cure. And with me, most people know that I pretty much come to support what needs support. True love asks for nothing. And after watching the film, I have a lot of questions within myself, wondering if I did the right thing. Down the line, how would this affect me? This is my second time doing it. But this time around, I've had one complication that I've been taking up with my doctor because I've developed what do you call jawbreaker size lump under my right arm. Between my doctor and Benchmark, I've been asking the question, why is this developing under my arm? And no one can come up with a solution or answer. So I just want to say to everybody in here, I'm taking a risk so that we can get to the solution. And I just ask for all of you guys to pray for me. That's all. Thank you.
So we were supposed to be out of the Crest at 9, so I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we are going to have to gather our belongings and take off. Remember to sign up as you leave on those pieces of paper so that we can contact you for future important issues and for Eric's next film on aluminum.
I had a question, but I don't want to ask it because I wanted to address the young woman who was in the Catholic high school. I don't know if you're still here in your class asking for that information. I teach in a Catholic high school, and I teach ethics, and I've been trying for years and finally found a way this year because I realize this issue is so sensitive to bring it into, and I did it through our section on social justice, which is communitarian versus individual rights. Communitarian being the greater good. And the first question I pose for the students is what is the greater good? It's not necessarily everybody having to do the same thing. And the second thing is that in the Catholic tradition, the highest moral decision-making faculty is the individual conscience, higher than the magisterium, higher than the pope, higher than anyone. And Thomas Aquinas says that if any law is unjust or unharmful, you're bound by an informed conscience, which means you do your study, to disobey that law. So take that back to your school and let them know that.
Yes, in my family we have other family members in another country that are potential immigrants, and there are several vaccines that are required for the person to come legally into the country. Do you know about the relative safety of those vaccines, and what can a person do if they see no way around that procedure?
I don't know any way around it. The relative safety, I don't know exactly which vaccines you're talking about, but I mean, you could certainly pull up the product inserts. I mean, they really have a lot of information on there on the FDA website. You could look at the simple version on the vaccine information sheets. They actually have some pretty alarming side effects listed on the CDC's vaccine information sheets. Those are two resources, the vaccine information sheets being very simple to read and understand, and the product inserts being very, very complicated, obviously, but readable. So that's probably where you would start. Find out which vaccines it is. Are they so bad you shouldn't get them? I don't know. I know most adults who get these vaccines, especially if you can get them maybe one at a time, spread out over many, many, many months, if not years, you would probably. Most adults handle them very well. It's these bad reactions we hear about that that can happen. So you kind of have to understand, I guess, how important is the immigration into our country. 99 people would get those vaccines and probably be fine, and then one person might get those vaccines and not be fine. So how do you look at those kinds of issues? I certainly don't know that I have an answer for you, but you can read about them through those two resources to start with.
Are there any herbal remedies, for example, that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of that have been really validated by any good scientific research. So I don't know yet.
All right, thank you.
Certainly make sure they're in the prime of health, with a healthy gut and healthy immune system, healthy allergic system, as best you can.
What to do? We have 4 people who really want to answer. Okay, so let's quick questions and quick answers.
Hi, I'm Becky. I just want to thank you for being our voices. I heard, let me tell you, I am a family that came from a side effect from drugs. I had a brother when I was 16 commit suicide from a side effect from an antidepressant. Of course, it's off the market now. So for a young age, I've been questioning everything. And I have 3 kids now. And so I heard a couple of things tonight. I heard revolt. I heard lockdown. I heard This is a misogynistic war. So I have 3 kids. I question everything. I'm a warrior. How really does David conquer Goliath? This is what I feel like. I feel like this is the turbulent times, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm a European citizen. And I said, if my liberties are taken away, I'm leaving. But I want to fight. And I have 3 kids, and I'm thinking, does a letter really do anything? Tell us what we can do.
Absolutely, a letter does a lot, and I want to encourage everybody to let their voice be heard. Remember, the vast majority of the people are looking at these legislations and scratching their heads and not doing anything about it. So if you're the individual that does something about it, I always encourage write a letter, send it via email. You know, most places snail mail is not the way to go, and a lot of snail mail doesn't get read. Always make a phone call. You know, if you send an email, make sure that you make a follow-up phone call. And remember what happened with the Lily Rider, just is in Eric's movie. It was the grassroots movement that brought the Senate to its knees and actually was able to get that Lily Rider taken out.
And thank you. And I can't wait to name drop you guys in my mom's group.
Well, I have 10 people affected by this mercury in their system. My dad, including, posted on Facebook today that his mind is going out of his, not being able to think clearly. So I'm wondering if chemtrails being put in and dropping mercury, but I'm not going to make you guys answer that. I'm just curious for you guys to get this up in the next promotions. Because I see them over my yard. I live on a flight line all the time, so that's one thing that really got me concerned. But is there natural herbs that can build the immunity stronger, like the American Indian soap? They didn't get sick. They didn't have doctors. They didn't have physicians. So maybe you guys can also look in your next movie, your documentary you put out, to find out natural ways to build up to where immunities don't have to, vaccines don't have to be given to people. You know, my nephew had grand mal seizures, and I was trying to get my sister to give him cannabis to treat that, to come find out that it's from the vaccines that he, when he was 5 years old, started having them seizures. Same with his father. So, and instead of, detoxifying the body as a way of through a natural herb process, and maybe you guys can find a way to help educate people in that sense rather than to take vaccinations. And I appreciate you guys big time. Thank you.
Hello. And I just want to be one person that says, God bless you guys for what you've done for parents. I thank God do not have a vaccine in your anyway, I won't go there. I have a controversial question, and I know it's hard to ask, and I hope I ask it correctly. But I think in my group of friends, and the people now, these are my friends because I've made a lot of new friends from these awesome people. We are concerned that maybe we can't really stop this because, I mean, have you guys heard is this population control? Are they trying to, the part of the bill that says any vaccine deemed necessary, if it passes, I mean, that literally means anything they choose. I mean, it's kind of controversial, but do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I want to be really super careful with that question. Knowing what I know about the best thing that we can do is we can expose the agencies where corruption is running rampant. And you can shine the light on those particular agencies, specifically here in the United States. Is there, historically, in other countries, have vaccines been used to inadvertently interject things like contraception? I've heard stories, but I can't really affirm those particular claims. But the biggest thing that you can do, and the biggest thing, I would never say that it's too late. I'm inspired every day by parents of wonderful special needs kids, and that have so much energy. They take care of these kids, they maintain their marriages, and they advocate all at the same time. And so I'm very, very encouraged by that. And I would, encourage, everybody in here that can write a letter, make a phone call, to shed light on these specific government agencies, and with me, it's always, I've been investigating the CDC since 2002, so the more that we can shine the light on these agencies, the more that we can prevent something like that, some type of cataclysmic event from happening.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being pioneers in this cause and using your power to help us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon. I'm from Oceanside, California, and it's more of a statement that if you guys actually speak to our senators tomorrow, I have concerns about the medical exemption with this bill. It goes further than what the CDC's 19 different pages for each vaccine says, and there's lots of them that have reasons why you should not vaccinate, but this bill would only cover cancer and HIV as exemptions, which is unfair if the CDC's own website has contradictions on why you should not vaccinate. How can they override that government agency's recommendations like eczema? MTHFR is brand new with the genetic defects coming out. How can they override science and medical reasons that we should not vaccinate? So I would appreciate that if you guys are talking to our senators tomorrow, that you relay that, because as a family with extreme eczema and a vaccine damaged child, this scares the heck out of me for my 18-month-old granddaughter, that she is going to be subjected to this despite the fact that the CDC says she should not be vaccinated.
Yes.
Thank you.
You lift him up.
Well, it's past my bedtime, but I just want to say that my sister was hurt by vaccines, and my mom and me flew all the way here just to say no to SP277. We just want to thank you for fighting for my rights, and we just thank you for following us. Yeah.
I just had a question. In the film, you talked about being sick the first time and what you did, and then being sick the second time, but it kind of cut off where you went with that process, and then are you finding that you're more susceptible and have to be more cautious now? Is this something that you are going to have to be vigilant with for the rest of your life, and do you have to continue, I guess, following up and whatnot?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of that question. The way mercury works is, and it was discussed in the science, but it's a really quick science piece. But if you're not susceptible to mercury exposure will actually make you more susceptible to it. It lowers your glutathione levels, so it binds to those selenoproteins that are responsible for maintaining your glutathione in the reduced state. So it'll lower glutathione on its own, and it'll also elevate your testosterone. So now you've just got the two variables that make you extremely susceptible to mercury. You can't excrete it. Testosterone is elevated. That's very synergistic with it. And I think after the first exposure, where I did fully recover within 6 months, everything went away through the Cutler protocol. The second time it was much more severe. I mean, the second time I was much more sick. I think it was just a larger exposure, and I think I was much more susceptible to it. And I also happened to be taking some time off. Even though I didn't have any symptoms, I was still chelating. But I took some time off. I was studying to take the LSAT, and when you're chelating, it moves mercury around in your brain. So I wanted to make sure, for a few months while I'm studying to take the LSAT, I want to make sure I have a clear brain. I'm going to take this LSAT, and then I'll start chelating some more. And by coincidence, that 3 months I took off is right when I got that second exposure, when I was building. By coincidence, I used to manage the design and construction of pharmaceutical manufacturing buildings, where they make drugs. And so I built for Baxter Pharmaceutical for a long time. I built for Amgen Pharmaceutical, and that's why I've got an Amgen shirt on in one of those shots. I should not have been wearing that shirt, but anyhow, the second time I was so much worse, and I also had systemic candida. Candida is an overgrowth of yeast that kind of goes hand in hand with mercury, and when you have candida problems, the drugs you take to bind the mercury and get it out of your body and your brain are sulfur-based, which feed yeast. So for a year, I literally took diflucan just to try to get the yeast under control. And once the yeast was under control, I was too scared to take the sulfur drugs because I didn't want the yeast to come back. So I started out, by this time I was already well into the research. I was talking to doctors, and scientists. I was looking at all sorts of different studies and different ways to boost glutathione levels, like taking methyl B12 shots with folinic acid and trimethylglycine. And there's been studies that show those will stabilize your methionine levels, your cysteine, your glutathione, which will help if you do have issues with those pathways. And then I've done everything else in the book. Boyd-Haley's OSR, I've done Gerson-type therapies that boost glutathione level in your liver by 700%, per one published study at least. I was doing everything you can imagine to try to get mercury out naturally instead of having to take these sulfur-based drugs. But then eventually I started picking up the sulfur-based drugs again, and it took a long time to recover from that second time, the second exposure. But, I've been 100% symptom-free, except for maybe some sensitivity to light still. I didn't think I had it until these huge lights were on me. But I haven't had symptoms since probably 2010. So second time I got sick was 2006. By about 2010, I was 100% symptom-free, and I haven't had symptoms since.
Thank you, and thank you so much for everything you're doing. It's appreciated very much.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Ben. I forgot my question because it's been answered more than a few times, but I do have a little bit to share. When I was 3 years old, less than 3 years old, I was shot up with 40 plus vaccines, and I've had a lot of recovery instances through like Epsom salt baths and special diet, gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, organic foods. And by 10 years old, it was deemed that I was no more autism. I was cured. And now by 18, I'm very happy to say that I can stand up and fight Senate Bill 277 and be with all you wonderful people. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, before Eric makes any closing comments, I just want to let you all know that tomorrow morning at 10, we are going to be having a rally opposing SB 277 on the west steps of the Capitol. It will run no longer than noon because we want to give people plenty of time to use the facilities, grab a bite to eat, and be in the hearing room, 4203. Right around 1. I don't know if they'll let us in at that point. The hearing is going to start at 1:30, but we want to make sure that our side fills those seats as well as possible. The attire is wearing red shirts. We have a great speaker lineup for the rally. You will get the treat of hearing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. again, and Eric will be speaking, and Dr. Brian Hooker will be speaking, and Dr. Bob Sears will be speaking, and I will be speaking, amongst others. So it's going to be a great rally. We're looking forward to having, hopefully, thousands of people turn out to show our legislators just the vehement opposition that exists in the state to the stripping of our rights in such a disgusting way. I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything tomorrow? Rally, hearing?
Thanks to Laura and all these other powerhouse moms. We've been meeting on this week after week, and Jessica and Noelle and Jean and Jill and Laura and all these, I'm going to miss a lot of them, but we literally have had meeting after meeting trying to coordinate all this, and these mothers, the ground troops in Sacramento here, because I'm on tour, Bobby's on tour, Jake's somewhere else, and these mothers have done an incredible job. Yeah. With not only this event, but tomorrow, it's going to be a big show tomorrow, and the effort they're putting into fighting this bill to stand up for everyone's rights and parental rights and children's rights and everything else is amazing, and literally they are the true heroes here. So really, if you know of any of these moms who are really putting all this together, give them a little bit of praise, because it's really, truly outstanding. And it's been like that in all these different capitals. Bob, you've been in Austin, Texas, Springfield, Illinois, Trenton, New Jersey, and literally these mothers are so passionate about this, and they work in 24 hours a day trying to get all this set up, and these legislative meetings with Bobby and the theater set up, and it has been unbelievable. Throughout this journey, I've really at certain points felt like I lost faith in humanity, and then I come across these type of people, and it completely restores my faith. And we're building a lot of momentum, and I just invite everyone to kind of stand up with. You guys are already here standing up, but anybody else you know, try to get them to really stand up for their rights and push to stop these bills state by state. And momentum's building fast. I mean, we've got a lot of momentum built up right now. If by any chance we can be successful here, and it might not be in this committee, we still have the Education Committee and the Judiciary Committee. We've got to be successful here because I think this is kind of ground zero of this movement. And if we can stop this, we're going to have a lot more success in these other states that we're continuing to go through. So, thank you all for listening.
And if you want to order trace amounts, it is now available for purchase. Go to www.traceamounts.com.